next up is going to be Cambon Jensen. Yeah, there already is the presentation. So there you go.
No, thank you. I can understand that you can see what I'm presenting already, so that's fine. And I will start by saying I'm very happy to be here. It's the first time that I'm actually participating in one of these sessions and have the chance to meet some of you and talk or at least present some of what we're doing, and I can hear what you're doing there. It's great, I think. What I'm going to talk about today is what we call using digital twins for global energy consumption optimization within large entity populations. I think that when something becomes academic, it needs to have a very long title, so that's why it has a long title. Irony may occur here. So who I am at first is that I'm working at a large company in Denmark. We are working with data mostly, and among those data, we are of course also working with energy data, energy consumption and such. So let me just jump to the next slide so that you can get an idea of who and what we are. We have two products in the area where I'm positioned, and we have one called ENERGYKEY, which is the energy MDR, MDM, EMS application, which is one of the leading applications within Denmark, and we would like to move on to the rest of Europe as well. And we have a Dito product, which is a data distribution platform, which is one of the leading platforms for collecting data and distributing data. And in between, we are validating and making value out of the data so that our customers have an easy access to high quality data. We are, as such, a part of a larger unit in our company called DIMA, which stands for Data Information Management and Analytics. And within that unit, we are working, of course, with a lot of data-driven solution applications. That means business intelligence, machine learning, and AI. So we are about between 250 to 300 people working in that area alone. And we are part of a national company called KMD, which is the largest and oldest IT provider in Denmark, mainly in the beginning for the public sector, but also more and more to the private sector as well. And for 2 years now, we have been part of the global company NEC from Japan. That means that we are part of a much larger strategy for our applications and development roadmaps, and we are also having access to R&D departments working with smart cities and safe cities, green world, and such. So that's very quickly to say who we are and what we are working with. So next I will go to more. So what are we actually doing when we are talking about digital twins? And I must admit up front that we are in a very early stage, which also means that we can allow to be very ambitious. It means that we can set very large goals for ourselves, have a vision, and then sooner or later, we of course will become a lot more knowledgeable, and therefore have to see what is actually possible. But there is one thesis that we are looking at, or hypothesis. We would like to know whether in a large population of buildings, for instance, by optimizing each and every one of them, if that was possible, would that also be like the same if we would like to optimize the entire problem of the entire population? And we're quite sure that that is not the case, but we would like to show that it is not the case because, for instance, ENERGYKEY, the application I was talking about before, a lot of the municipalities in Denmark are using that application, and therefore they have an interest in knowing whether or how they can optimize energy consumption within the municipality. And as you know, heating, for instance, consumption is going up and down all the time. But what's the best strategy for starting up extra capacity? By doing so, that is a very expensive scenario. So if you could control all your sub-problems, then you might avoid having to start up each of these extra heating plants in order to meet the demand. And that may not necessarily mean that you are optimizing all of the sub-problems. So this is what we are looking into, and what does that have to do with digital twins? I will have to elaborate a little bit more on that. So the hypothesis is the following. We're looking at this. This is a figure that should show that by looking at the horizontal line, if we say that that is the level of digital twinness, or the level of how much we have digitized concerning a certain building or a certain entity. If it's high, we are far left, and if not, we are far right. But on the y-axis, we have the size of the population, meaning that how many buildings, how many houses do we have, which is modeled in a digital way. And the thesis is, or the hypothesis is, that we have select plants or factories or sports arenas and public places that are highly digitized, and therefore we have a lot of knowledge and control of one specific or very specific buildings. But then we have, if you look at the other end of the scale, millions of housing buildings, which we do not have the same level of digital information about, but we have a lot of them. So could we in some way combine the knowledge that we have on the x-axis with the one that we have on the y, and see if we could benefit from both of them? That's the hypothesis. So what are we going to do? So looking at on the left side, that we would like to base our decision on theory. That means that we have a lot of information about a certain building, which is a theory. We would have an algorithm or model or some calculations or applications trying to decide based on input parameters what is actually what we want to do. On the other side, we may have the reality, meaning we may have actual meter measurements, actual time series of consumption over time on a large number of specific buildings, and maybe even the same buildings. And that means that there might be an overlap in between, at which we could focus our digital twin roadmap, or so to speak. So it might be interesting to see if there is an overlap or some place where the modeling and the reality equal each other, and then let's have a more close look at that. So if we look at the theory part first, in Denmark, if you don't know it, we have approximately 2.3 million buildings, and they are, as you can see, most of the buildings are housing buildings, single houses at which people live in the suburbs and the countryside. And then we have some kind of boats. We have also factories and public buildings and so forth. So this is the distribution of the different types of buildings in Denmark. And why I'm showing you this, I'm showing you this because in Denmark we have a long tradition of collecting a lot of data about our buildings and people and a lot of other stuff, which we altogether call basic data. And basic data is also something which is easily available, because we have a strategy in Denmark saying that we collect all the basic data. So we have information about every and each building in all of Denmark, and we have quite a lot of information on each building, and it's freely available to everyone. So that makes it possible to make systems that can take these data and use it. And the theory here is that maybe we do not have a very, very, very precise digital twin, but we have what you call it, the profile of certain buildings. And by not having very exact information about one building, then we have a lot of buildings, maybe with the same profile. So that's the objective here, is that let's say that we can find some archetypes of buildings, and if we can model that specific building or choose that as a model for a lot of buildings, then we can build a more exact digital twin of that archetype, and then say that if that building is going to react in a certain way, then we believe that thousands of other buildings will react in the same way. So turning to reality, we have the KMD energy solution, as I said before, which collect a lot of these metadata from the same buildings, many of the same buildings, at least if we're talking about a municipality that has its product. So we could combine the two and see what does theory say and what does reality say. And based on that, we could, as I said before, we could identify some archetypes, saying this is the perfect is the wrong word, but this is a very good modeling of a certain type of building, which we believe is a profile for hundreds of thousands of other buildings. And by doing so, we could, as I said before, we could try and zoom in on that one and say, okay, if we are to intervene with that building based on information that we have about weather, about the certain temperature, a lot of other stuff, what would that mean? And I don't know if it makes sense or not, but now I've just said that it's not 100% digital twins, but they might be cousins or uncles or whatever we would call this. And in that way, we would, as I said before, on certain parameters say that there are certain buildings that are very similar. So what we would like to do when we get this far is that whenever our perfect digital twin says that this behavior it would be nice to do, it will send out information to all the digital cousins, which will then do it, and then information about how it actually the data collected from those buildings would be collected in order to see if if it match or not, and somehow we would have to go back and calibrate our digital twin, or put some other cousins in. Maybe a certain building didn't hit the profile perfectly, or not at least as much as we thought. So that's the idea, but what are we actually going to, what kind of problems could we start to look at? And one of the stuff that we're looking at is that we have two strategies. If you're looking very, very closely at trying to solve the sub-problem, we would usually look at temperature setbacks, meaning that within certain hours of the day, we could plan that we would lower the temperature, because during nighttime, during other times during the day, we have identified time slots which would make it possible to save energy in that area. But that doesn't necessarily solve the overall problem, meaning that if everyone is lowering temperature during night, yes, that's good for the individual, but that will make some excess energy available during the night. But if we kept on heating during the night, we could instead say that we could allow to interrupt the service at peak hours, saying that if the building was heated 24/7, at other certain points it wouldn't be felt like a temperature drop if we would stop heating for half an hour at certain points if during peak time when that occurred. So that's the aim is to see turning a bit away from sub-optimizing to optimization of the entire population of buildings. So turning back to what we are looking at, this is the same slide as I showed at the beginning of the presentation, but it is a matter of saying how much does it differ if you're trying to optimize sub-problems, which it's not a critique, but I hear a lot of the work going on is trying to optimize one certain problem, but not looking at the entire picture of the entire energy consumption within the entire suburban area and such. So yeah, that was what I would like to present today. As you can see, this is more at this stage a concept more like than it is an actual application or project yet. And I believe that some of the stuff that Vanessa showed could actually be some of the tools that could be needed in order to try and figure out which and what buildings should be affected at some using some certain strategies. Yeah, so that was the word for me. I hope it could inspire you a little bit, and I'm curious to see if you have any questions regarding this.
Well, thank you. Sick. This is a very interesting approach that you're taking there. I was wondering when you talked about like the digital cousins and the digital uncles, this kind of identification, it sort of sounded to me like these clustering algorithms that, for example, Netflix uses.
Probably.
Okay. So
it's just me not knowing as much about digital twins and the technology and the academics about this. So sorry about that. So there might be some of the things that I have been touched. You may say, isn't that equal to this and that? I'm here to learn. So that will probably, as you say, you direct me in a way of what you call it, clustering of.
Well, like into groups, like clustering of customers into certain groups. Like, for example, there's been a lot of talk at Netflix. So the customers are clustered by their interest in certain kinds of movies, and you're sort of clustering buildings depending on their load profile. I was just trying to paraphrase, seeing if I understood it correctly, what you're trying to do.
I believe it's in that area. So knowing that now, I will have to dive much more into that, research for that kind of information and make this concept better using those. So thank you for that.
I think this is like one of the the big data techniques where there's a lot of talk about in these customer-oriented companies. But I also don't know too much about that. I just thought it's really interesting that you're trying to apply this to like the thermal management of buildings. That's cool. Arnaud?
Yeah, quickly, thank you very much, Sig, for the presentation. Just wanted to better understand your long-term strategy. Is it that approach that you presented is the ability for you to develop a new products, a new service for the municipalities? How do you envision that approach being used or deployed on the market?
We will have to focus on the municipalities, for instance, because they have a large number of buildings, and within the municipalities they have these power plants making electricity, making heating, making a lot of stuff. And as I said during the presentation, it is very expensive to in peak hours to start up an extra power plant. They have, in the municipality where I live, they have one big power plant, but they have also distributed smaller ones around the municipality in order to keep up with the peak hours. But if they could avoid that, just one of those could save a lot of money. So during winter time or during other times when they have to start it up a lot, they might in some cases be able to prevent it. So if they could prevent starting one of those extra power plants 1, 2, 3 times a year, I think that they have already saved money in order to if they have bought this kind of a application. So we believe that this is a product that municipalities and other owners of a large portfolio of buildings would like to buy.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, how can you influence the temperature in these buildings? Is there some sort of smart meter where you can just sort of like lower the temperature for certain buildings and then increase it again?
I think the model will be that when we have identified certain types of buildings, clusters, let's say that, then let's say a lot of customers could buy in on this service and say, I can identify myself as being among part of this cluster, and then they can subscribe to events so that they can set up their own system to say, would I like to use this event or not? If it's coming, what should I do? And then they can decide to use their own policies on what they're actually doing. But in order to become more more clever about this, we would of course need to know what they're actually doing in order to see. So what we're actually measuring within our ENERGYKEY system, why was the behavior like it was, so that we could include that in our model when knowing what to send out the next time we will send out events.
Yeah, I imagine in like communicating these incentives to customers,
Yeah.
this is also going to be quite a challenge.
Yeah, it will be. I mean, if you haven't got full control on every building and you don't, then you will have to say that we can at least provide the service, and those who would like to react on these events, they can do it, because we believe it will be beneficial for you and everyone if you do that.
Peter, you had a question?
Yes, thank you very much. So thank you, Sig, for your presentation. I have a comment. What I also find very interesting is that you are going to use, you could call it a centralized clustering approach. Cluster buildings, and basically on that information decide a better operation planning. So this is very interesting, I find, because if you look at the typical approaches as we go towards the transition to a smart grid, we tend to do a lot of very detailed modeling of single appliances and houses, as you mentioned in the beginning.
Yes.
On this road, it could be very interesting to kind of use these low-hanging fruits to use a clustering approach, which is more coarse. So you lose a lot of information, but the gain might be very high compared to what you have to do to earn it. So I just want to say, I find it very interesting, and I could believe that in a 5 to 10 year, this could be very interesting as one step towards the fully blown smart grid of housing.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that this is not totally what you think. At least it's a good approach. But I believe, as I said, regarding the solving the sub problem and the global problem, is that we're overlooking something bigger. If you are looking too closely at just one building, you need to look at clusters in order to see who would benefit and who won't, and then making the average calculation somehow and get the benefit from the. And I believe if you look at the largest population of what you have, that's also where you can actually gain the most overall. Yep. But thank you for being allowed to present to you, and please don't hesitate to contact if you have further questions or just want to give your input in order to develop this idea further. Thank you.